Today's topic is a track called Hotel Babylon, which uses a set of chord progressions that sound really great in jungle and other atmospheric styles, or even modern R&B and chill-out music. I'm going to show you the chords, break them down piece by piece, and tell you why they work so well. Let's get started. We're going to analyze this track in the key of G major. That will be important later. We're going to start off with a single chord, a root position E minor 9, our 6th chord. So root, 3rd, 5th, 7th, 9th. Minor chords have a way of sounding dark due to the minor 3rd, while sounding beautiful at the same time due to the extensions, which form a major 7th chord above the root. This is a very stable chord, and we hang on to it for the first 8 bars of the track. At the beginning of the song, this sounds like it could be our tonic chord, mainly because it's the only time we sit on a chord for more than 2 bars at a time. The interest here comes from the melody, which outlines the upper tones of the E minor 9 chord with the addition of A, the 11th, as a passing tone. Here's where things start getting interesting. In the next section, which we'll call section B, we go from E minor 9 to E flat major 7. Root, 3rd, 5th, 7th, 3rd. We get there by having 3 of our tones, the root, the 5th, and the 9th, move chromatically to the notes of the destination chord. This is combined with some nice contrary motion where the 9th in the melody is moving up by a half step, while the root and the 5th move down by a half step, and the 3rd and the 7th stay in place, going from minor to major in the process. There's not really a great name for the E to E flat movement. We could call it 6 minor 9 to flat 6 major 7, or we could just call it non-functional passing harmony via chromatic movement by half steps, based on E flat major being non-diatonic to G major. Our next 2 chords are also major 9 chords that don't belong in G major. The first one of those is when we go from E flat major 7 to A major 9. This doesn't seem like it should sound as good as it does because the 2 chords are a tritone away from each other, normally one of the most dissonant intervals. The secret here is that every note of the E flat major 7 only needs to move by a half step to find one of the chord tones in the A major 9. So we can go from and all together. This is a variation on harmonic planing, where chords of the same or related types like major 7th and 9th chords sound good moving from chord to chord in parallel motion, even if they're not diatonic to one another. We've talked about this in all of my previous jungle videos. So just, the idea we can take, say, major 7th chords and go, and that'll sound good together because they're all major 7th chords. Here we have something similar. The chord voicings aren't parallel, but the half-step intervals between all of the starting and destination chord tones give it a surprisingly smooth sound. And once again, as with the previous 2 chords, the left and right hands are moving in contrary motion. The right hand top note melody is moving up by another half step. The lower voices are following along. And the 5th in the left hand, which was previously here, is going to move down to A and E. So, together, contrary. Now we have an instance of more conventional harmonic planing where we're going to go from that A major 9 to D major 9, keeping the same parallel voicing in the right hand. So we had 9, 3, 5, major 7 here, and we're going to move up to 9, 3, 5, major 7, then D major. We're also going to keep the left hand pattern consistent by taking that same root and fifth and moving it downward in contrary motion to D and A. So all together. Here's the whole sequence. This progression works for a couple reasons. One of those is that the melody created by the top voicing of each chord moves chromatically for those first 3 notes. Which adds some glue to 3 chords that otherwise don't belong in the same key. We break that pattern with the last chord and a large leap in the top melody. But it also fits together in its own way thanks to parallel planing. Finally, going from the end of the sequence looping back to the beginning, the D major 9 is stable enough on its own, though it's still a little bit disorienting coming from there, that we can go from the D major 9 and jump back down to the E minor 9 to start the progression all over again. One way to think of this sequence is a 6, 2 major 9, 5 major 9 progression in the eventual key of G major, with the E flat major 7 as a passing tension between the 6 and 2. Or we could just think of it as beautiful, non-functional chord movement, especially without any dominance in there, like we find in the best jungle music. The track goes through the B progression a couple of times, then at the end of those 8 bars we're on D major 9, and instead of going back to E minor 9, we go to a completely new non-diatonic chord, C suspended 13. This is the first in a 2-chord progression that we'll call section C. We get C suspended 13 from taking a C dominant 7, removing the 3rd, and adding the 9th, 11th, and 13th all on top. Next, we move to an F minor 11, root 3rd, 5th, minor 7th, 9th, 11th. In the case of both chords in this section, I've arranged this particular passage to include the song's melody in the upper notes. So it's this. If you're just arranging these chords as an accompaniment to a different melody, or as atmospheric pads or whatever else, you can just play the full chords without the descending voice on top. This sequence doesn't really fit harmonically with the previous section. We have the C suspended 13, which doesn't fall into G major due to the F natural and the B flat. Then we have the F minor 11, which also falls outside with the F, A flat, E flat, and B flat chord tones. Given that 3 of our 4 chords prior to this fell diatonically in the sharp keys, the added flats really stand out. So we go from we could think of this as a vamp between two non-diatonic chords that add tension and contrast, and or we could also call it a borrowed 4 suspended 13 and a flat 7 minor 11 in the key of G major. After section C, we have a 2-bar sequence that we'll call a transition. 2 bars of melody with bass that implies E flat major 9. We have E flat and B flat in the left hand, played as a block in our arrangement, where it's a single note bass line in the original recording. On top of that, we have a melody that outlines the remaining tones of the major 9 chord, the 7th, the 9th, and the 3rd. This chord is the one that finally primes us for hearing G major as our adopted tonic chord by preemptively acting as the chromatic mediant of the tonic chord. I'll explain that a bit later. We begin section D with a G major 7, so root, 7th, 3rd, 5th, implying G major 9 with the melody included. This sets up another beautiful harmonic sequence where we go from 2 bars of G major 7 followed by 2 bars of E flat major 7. This already sounds great because of the consecutive non-diatonic major 7 chords, but we also get an extra bit of sparkle from the chromatic mediant relationship between G major and E flat. Chromatic mediants are non-diatonic chords that have roots a third apart from one another and share one common triad note between them, with the other 2 notes of the triad moving chromatically to the note of the next chord. So if we have this E flat here, we go 3rd, and then half step, half step. Adding the major 7th extension allows us to use a voicing where we keep the D on top, acting as the 5th of G major 7 and the 7th of E flat major 7. And have the F sharp move chromatically instead, going from the 7th of G up to the 3rd of E flat. Chromatic mediants are special because they're 2 chords that audibly belong to different keys, but the combination of shared and chromatic tones makes them sound like they somehow belong together anyway. We've seen this many times before in the 90s R&B progression, where the flat 6 chord is technically a chromatic mediant that connects back to the tonic via the flat 7. So 6, 7, tonic. The G major 7 is set up in such a way that we want to return to it at the end of the sequence, and it has a stability that sounds very natural if we were to end on it as the final chord with that D on top. So if we did this is probably because we started on E minor 9 all the way back to the beginning, and our ears want to believe that we were really in the relative key of G major all along. However, the song stays consistently unpredictable to the end by restarting the 4-bar sequence on G major 7 for the following 2 bars, then swerving to a C suspended 13 chord for bar 13, and a B flat dominant 13 chord in bar 4. So root, 5th, 7th, 9th, 11th, 13th, root again, 3rd. If these chords sound familiar, it's because these are almost identical to the chords in section C. With the B flat 13 containing that same chord collection of 6 notes that we used for the F minor 11 chord earlier, so what I just played. We stick a B flat on bottom, add the D up top to acknowledge the final note of the melody, and we have a B flat dominant 13. So we're on that G to this C suspended 13 to B flat dominant 13. And then finally, we're going to end this whole journey with one last C suspended 13 in a lower voicing, arpeggiated downward for a bit of extra shimmer. If we view G major as our tonic, we can think of the 3-chord coda as a borrowed 4 suspended 13, a dip into flat 3 dominant 13, and back to 4 suspended 13 for an unresolved ending. Given the harmonic twists and turns that we've encountered throughout this song with no dominant to tonic resolutions, this is one of the most appropriate ways I can think of to bring this song to a close. In conclusion, Hotel Babylon is a great lesson on starting a major key song on the 6 minor 7 instead of the tonic, using a flat 6 major 7 as a passing chord after 6 minor 9, using borrowed 2 major 9 and 5 major 9 chords to create harmonic ambiguity, using 4 suspended 13 and flat 7 minor 11 to build tension, using flat 6 major 9 as a substitute dominant, and using 4 suspended 13 as a final chord to deny resolution. That was our lesson on Hotel Babylon. I hope y'all enjoyed learning about one of my favorite slices of 2000s British electronica. If you want to support what I do, please like, subscribe, and comment, and go check out my Patreon in the description below. If you want to learn about a more random selection of music, go check out my second channel, How Pop Music Works Live. Until next time, take care of yourselves, take care of someone else, and have a good day.